Welcome to Drew Blazik with Logos and Markets. In this video, we're going to do the cost schedule and we're going to see the application of it. And again, you go to Logos and Markets website, you can download the SIM method Excel sheet and you can practice this. So look in the show notes for that link. Okay, first thing I'd like to do is just look at the Excel sheet before we work on it. We got the revenue schedule. So right away, there's nothing in cost that directly inputs a revenue. Now you got the cost schedule, you got everything's blank here. The income statement, so cost schedule is going to directly impact the income statement and it's going to affect the working capital schedule. That's the application. We're going to complete the cost schedule. We must grab a number from the revenue schedule for the cost schedule, and then we're going to plug in once we're completed into the working capital and the income statement. It's going to forecast costs for us. Let's look at the grade. You can see that the balance sheet's balance has nothing to do with the balance sheet. If you mess up the cost schedule, it's going to affect 59.3. About 40% of your entire financial model will be affected by the cost schedule. And review the rest of this to see what does it directly or indirectly impact. As you can see, nothing in the balance sheet it directly impacts, but it will impact current assets, current liabilities. So it's a great way to really understand how cost is affecting things. All right, so let's work on this. So what we got here is a couple things we want to input down. In the revenue video, I showed that you can go to, we have to know the annual sales volume. We have to know the quantity. Well, that's found in the revenue schedule. So that's the annual sales volume. We're going to plug that in. We're just going to drop that down. So let's plug that in. A couple other numbers we want to know. We want to know cost of inflation. Well, cost typically is going to rise at the rate of inflation. So what we want to do, we're going to plug in, and this is real important to get the correct year. I'm going to have you only plug in the 2023 through 26. We're ignoring 2022. So I'm going to go here, 2023. It's real important. A couple things you could do. You could drop down. You can go to the revenue schedule, which I have it here, or you can go to our scenario page and bring it in. All right, so what we want to do is cost per unit. We got variable costs, we got fixed costs, then we got total costs, and then we got the cost in millions, our total cost. And the total cost is what we're going to plug in to our income statement. A couple things you want to think about. Variable cost is dependent on output. The more output you produce, the more the variable cost will change. Fixed cost is not dependent on output. Therefore, if it's a fixed cost per unit, the more units you produce, the cheaper it becomes per unit. The less units you produce, the more it looks like it's going to cost per unit. So, quick example, if the fixed cost is $1 million, let's say you have loans you have to pay back no matter what. Let's say you have lease you have to pay back no matter what. Rent, operating labor, whatever it is, you have to pay it back. If you produce one unit, that means it's going to be $1 million divided by 1. That's $1 million per one unit. If you produce 1 million units, it's going to cost you $1 per unit, right? Cost is 1 million and you produce 1 million units. So it's real important to see that in variable costs. If you remember from economic course, as you produce more and more and more, your capacity becomes strained at the unit. You're overworking your employees. It's going to shoot up in cost. As you produce more at the beginning, you can really drop the variable cost and then it's going to shoot up. The fixed cost, as you produce more and more units, it's going to get cheaper and cheaper per unit. So you want to see how that's affected. So what we have here, we want to go to our assumptions. And what we did for the first projected year, this is going to be logical stuff. We have raw materials, we have utilities, we have rent. As you can see, the raw materials and utilities are a per unit basis. And then we have rent, operating, and other and SG&A. That's in millions. So that's important, what we're going to plug in. That's going to be the total cost. This is per unit. And does that make sense? It does. Raw materials per unit, utilities per unit, and then we got rent is the overall. We don't have per unit for rent. That's going to be, we're going to go to our accounting team and say, what was the total amount of rent that we owed? All this is going to grow at the rate of inflation. Okay. So let's go back to the financial model. So we're going to look at variable costs, raw materials and utilities. That's going to be a per unit. This is in millions. Let's go back to our assumptions. Raw materials is a per unit and utilities. So what we have here, raw materials and utilities are variable costs, and we have the per unit. So I'm going to plug that in or input it in. I can drag that down, and what we can do now is get the total. All I did was sum those up. That's a total variable cost per unit. And now what I want to do is, how are we going to forecast? This is what we made the projection for the first forecasted year, projected year. And now we're going to go forward. I'm going to go to the previous year, and I'm going to multiply it times 1 plus inflation. Okay, and this is important, and you can do this correctly. If I drag this down, right? So I do utilities. If I drag it down, I want this multiplied times it. I want inflation to drag to the right, right? I want it, the columns to be open, but I do not want it to drag down inflation. So I'm going to hit function F4 twice. I want that number, the dollar sign in front of the row, so I can drag it down. And then watch what this happens. It's really quick. Control R and D, and it fills it in. So if I hit utilities, look what it did. It multiplied the utility K52, and then it did the inflation rate. And if I go here and look, it did the proper inflation rate because I just put that dollar sign in front of the row, not the column. And then all we have to do here, the forecast per unit for variable costs, is drag it out. Okay, go back to our assumptions, and now we have rent, operating labor, other, and we're not doing SG&A, and other. We have it in millions. Well, this is a fixed cost. These are fixed costs. I owe it no matter what. Rent, operating labor, and other. So I'm going to go to the financial model. That's in millions. That means it is the fixed costs in millions total. So I'm just going to input those in. So we got that, and now I get to total it up. That's in millions. That's the fixed costs. So you go to the accounting team and say, what was the rent, operating labor? You can find out what it was. We make our guess. We make our first projected guess, and what we think is it's going to grow at the rate of inflation. So I'm going to multiply that times 1 plus, now let's go to the inflation rate above here. And again, what do I want to lock in that inflation rate? I want to drag to the right. I want to leave the column open, but I don't want the inflation to drag down when I drag these other numbers. So I'm going to hit function F4 twice. And I'm going to close it up. You do that. Now I get to highlight those and hit Control RD, and that fills in the rest. I already have this filled. Control to the R. Okay, so now all we have to do is let's find out what is the fixed cost per unit. I already got the total fixed costs. Remember, this is in millions. If I'm going to get it per unit, right, this is really divided by 1,000. I'm going to have to multiply it times 1,000. This is a per unit price for variable costs. So now I'm going to get the total variable costs. I'm going to have to multiply it times 1,000 to get in, divide it by 1,000 to get it in millions right here, because we're going to do it by our thousands of units. All right, so let's get to the fixed costs. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go equals. We want to find out what is it per unit. So I'm going to take the rent, the total, right? This is the total. I want to find out per quantity. I'm going to divide it by, and now we're going to go to the annual sales volume, what we brought in. And then I want to multiply it times 1,000. Okay, so I want to think about how to drag this across to make this quick. The first number was our number here. I don't want to put a dollar sign in front of anything. I want to drag it to the next year, and I want to drag it down where it does operating labor and other. However, the quantity, I want to function F4 twice. I want that to drag to the right to the next quantity, but I don't want it to drag down. So let's hit function F4 twice. Got that correct. Now I do is RD, fill that in. I'm going to hit Alt equals. You can see if you practice this, you can get pretty good at it. And now what we want is, what is the total cost per unit? Well, it's total fixed costs plus the total variable costs. Next, what we want to find out, what's the total variable cost? Total variable cost. Well, I got the variable cost per unit. We found that out, found what it was in the previous year. So now what I want to do is find out what is our raw materials, our total. So I'm going to find out the raw materials per unit, what it costs, and I'm going to multiply that times the units. Right? Makes sense. That's the total. Now it's in, remember the millions. I don't want to show it in millions. I'm going to divide it by 1,000. Right? Now let's think about the numbers I picked. The first number I want to move freely to the right, freely down. However, the quantity, I do not want it to move down, but I want it to move to the right. So I'm going to hit function F4 twice, hit enter, control R then D. That fills in there. And hit Alt equals. That's going to be that. And then fill there. So we did pretty quick. Now what we can do is find out the total cost. Total cost is going to be the total fixed costs plus the total variable cost. Control R. Cost curve is, or cost curve. Cost schedule is 100% complete. Now we got to figure out what is the application of it. Well, we just forecasted our cost of sales, and this is important. It's not the total cost. That's when we include the SG&A. What we want to do is our cost of sales, which is right here. Forecast that in. And then that can give us our all equals. I could find out the total variable cost. I'm just going to put for your Excel sheet, make sure it is gray so you know to do it. And then the only other thing, so the cost schedule is going to directly forecast our cost for the income statement, and then it's going to directly impact our working capital because we need our cost of sales. And this is very important. A lot of people make this mistake, is the cost of sales is for the working capital. So when I go to the cost schedule, or you go to the, actually you're going to input it probably from the income statement, not the cost schedule. You do not want the total cost. You want the cost of sales. You want the number that we solved in the cost schedule right here. So some people make that mistake. Cost of sales is what we need. And I'm going to drag that across. And then let's go to the grade. And that is, what do we have left? 90. Oh, it does this. I'll have yours filled in. We need that number filled in as right. We need to put in the actual and the cost of sales from the income statement. Now the grade should show 100%. There you go. That's the cost schedule. Now I'll just say a couple things. Now typically costs will look like that. You're gonna have different line items, and then to figure out how to start the cost schedule, you may have some different equations. Like it might be that it's a certain percent of fixed cost to variable cost to total cost. You have to figure out the first actual year, then you can forecast it out. Any questions, visit Logos and Markets. You could download the Excel sheet if you want to practice for an exam, practice for your job, get really good and efficient with it. And that's it. God bless.